So we worked through some audio issues, but it ended up working out really good. So chat in, or if you want to go off mute, feel free to go off mute. Why do you think I'm talking to you about emotions? We're here to talk about change. Why do you think I'm talking to you about emotions? So again, either chat or feel free to come off mute.
Change brings about emotion.
Absolutely. Anybody else have any ideas?
Emotions often block an individual's ability to see the value of the potential change.
Yep, absolutely. Andrea said our emotions color, I missed that one. Emotions color how we react to the circumstances of our lives. Emotions are the primary influence of how we react to change. Yeah, absolutely. Good job. Change usually means uncertainty. Yep. A lot of good ones coming in. We are colored, if you remember, a lot of what we talked about with Sarah, and I'm sure she talked brain science and a lot of different things about us being able to react differently. And it's just biologically in our nature when something is not the same to have an emotional response to it. And change really helps you, the understanding the emotional component to change really helps you to understand people's behaviors and the change process behind what's going on in their lives. So we're going to talk a lot about that. If you thought we're going to have this whole business meeting about operating, changing, and all that stuff, we're actually going to be talking a lot about emotions, because people are run by emotions. That's why emotional intelligence is so important. That's why we need to pause before we think about what we're saying, because a lot of times emotions just kind of hijack what we're feeling, and especially in this uncertainty that can happen. So before we get started, I want us to all think about and level set on what are some of the recent changes that are happening in our life. So Kathy, can you go to the next slide for me, please? Or maybe we might have a delay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Perfect. So brainstormed with Kyle a little bit when we were talking. We said, hey, what's going on? What are some changes that might resonate with everyone? COVID. That's a big one. And I told him earlier today, you all might be sick about talking about it. So we can ignore that one too if you're done with that one. But a lot of changes keep on happening with COVID. We have some locations that are closing. The operations are shutting down within those cities. People are working 100% remote. And then we've got the AmeriCorps turnover, right? So they're constantly turning over, and that's a change, and having to onboard somebody new and all of that. So what I'd like us to think of, I've got a couple of empty boxes in there. You are welcome to chat in or type right onto the screen if you want to do that. But what are some other changes that are happening around you in the organization? Did we get all of them on there? What are some other ones that you can think of if you think about changes? Staff changes, okay. Hiring new team members, new software. Kristen, is there a particular new software that's coming out? There is, okay.
Yeah, we just adopted a new expense pay system, which really affects me for like personal reimbursements. And then we're also starting to pilot some construction management software. So it's a lot, actually.
Okay, construction management and expense. All right. Staff changes. So I'm going to break down the new software into the construction management and expense system, the payable system. Is payables different than the expense one?
No, that's the same thing.
Okay. The reason why I'm asking is I eventually want everyone to pick like the top 4 or 5. And what we're going to end up doing is we're going to end up bringing out and putting together some change plans together based on these. Okay, so he's got some grant terms, government. All right. Community needs. Okay. So I am going to just quickly put on here some different ones that we have so we can have them, and don't mind my spelling because I'm trying to talk at the same time. Well, I can't read my handwriting on one of them. So if I missed it, let me know. Oop, that's supposed to be changes. Okay. So let's think through. We've got a list on there: COVID, locations closing, working remote, AmeriCorps, community needs, government, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So why don't we take the annotation tool, and why don't we point to the ones that we think are the most important, or either draw a line next to them or something. So let's kind of highlight what are the ones that are the most important, and or the ones that you would like to work on today. And if you go up to view options, you can click, if you click on annotate, okay, perfect. You all know what's going on. Awesome.
They're so good at that.
They are.
Yeah.
Okay, construction management. Okay. So it looks like we have COVID, working remote, AmeriCorps. And then Kathy, help me. We got staff changes.
Well, we've got government.
Government.
Somebody really wants government.
Okay.
That's me, and you shouldn't prioritize it because I'm quite certain I'm the only person on this phone call that works on, that is being impacted by that.
Okay.
Government, or at least SSB's business is related.
Well, I wish I knew how to fix our government anyways. It's kind of a big, we don't have
Well,
enough time today to do that.
Yeah, no, yeah, you and me both, or enough people or enough money. But it does, a lot of folks or a lot of offices are changing over, and that affects SPP's advisory and advocacy work.
Yeah.
In state and local governments that have been impacted by disaster, and with those federal lawmakers who sort of enact and monitor legislation and the performance.
All right. So this is what I have, if I'm reading correctly. COVID, working remote, AmeriCorps turnover, staff changes, and community needs. Is there any other one that anyone absolutely wants to have on here? Okay, we're gonna, this is practice. This is honestly an opportunity for us to go through and practice putting some specific things in place. You'll be able to apply these same principles to any of them on here. I just want us to have an opportunity to kind of put some things in place. So, all right, so we're going to put a pin in this. We're going to come back to it in a minute when we start thinking about how we actually plan for change. So why don't we right now go on to our next slide, and what we're going to talk about is types of changes. Okay, so there are a couple of different types of changes. I pretty much split them into two different kinds. There are what I like to say crisis changes or unexpected changes. COVID could have been one. Hurricane is a change that comes in. I mean, you can't really plan a lot for it, although I'm sure you all have plans in place on how to do some different things. We have working remote. That was a quick change. A lot of different things that can come about. And we sometimes call those crisis or disruption, but those are the changes that swiftly happen to us. The other types of changes are those that can be more planned out. Okay, so we can think through, like the construction management software that's coming out or the expense system. This is a change that's going to happen to the organization, but we can plan for those and we can put some things in place to help the change happen more quickly and also to move people through the change management process better. So before we start talking about the more planned change, and all of the different things that's happening around there, I want to talk a little bit more about some reactions and what happens to us overall. Because again, as we talked about in the beginning, understanding what's happening to your brain, understanding the emotions that are happening to you and to others can really help you to go through and move through stuff. So as we move on to the next slide, you're going to see on the top right-hand corner, I try to approximately put those based on what's on the slide. Those are all references to the pages in the participant guide that you have. So if you want to look at it and dive deeper, I'll let you know what page we're on, but in case you forget, tune out, get a phone call, or anything along those lines, just go ahead and look up there and you'll be able to see it. Okay, so as part of the pre-work, I sent out the SCARF assessment that was optional for you to be able to take. I put it as optional because you have to put in your email address and some people don't like doing that. But I am interested for those of you that did take it, if you wouldn't mind using a stamp or a line or whatever, don't draw attention to yourself. Which one or two came up as your top 2 things to consider? So what were your top 2? Was it status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness? So as you are doing that, perfect, you all got that. I want to talk about a little bit about what this is. So David Rock is a neuroscientist. He leads the Neuro Leadership Institute. I know Kathy is going through and doing some certifications from there. Fascinating things that he is able to understand. What he's able to understand and what he thinks about is what we had talked about a little bit earlier, that emotions and a perception of threat coming in, it completely rattles us, and it's biological. So he ended up moving it into 5 different categories that he has on there. We are all wired to approach things differently. On page 1 in your participant guide, there's a whole outline of different examples on there of things that you can look at, as well as ways to help yourself and others get through them. But I'm going to quickly cover these because this will be important as we think about how we plan for change, what people might be going through. So it's called the SCARF model. SCARF model has nothing to do with scarf around your neck. It literally just is, he was able to create an acronym out of the stuff he has on here. All right, so status. This is your importance to others. You see this a lot if your title changes. Okay, so if you were a director before and then you may still be getting paid the same, but they moved you into a manager role, that's status. If you have, that is going to feel like a threat to you, having that taken. It's how you are relative importance to others is what they call it. Another example is, at Farmers, we had all of the directors and managers had their own office with a door. That was a status thing. You could not wait until you got into the office because you have finally arrived, right? Well, now with open office, this was pre-COVID, obviously, they wanted everyone on the floor so you could all hear different things and understand what's going on. So they removed those directors and there's vice presidents and all the people that worked forever to get to that office out on the floor. So they were among us normal folks, right? And so that was a reaction of, you're taking my status away. certainty. This is a big one we happen to see a lot, along with fairness, which we got a lot on fairness. Yeah, your fairness meters go up all the time. So certainty is being able to predict, right? So this is if you get a new leader or a new team member comes on, or you get, like for me, we've been reorganized and realigned quite a bit. So my job has changed. It's being able to predict. You get in this pattern, and it's actually your brain actually goes into a brain hack where you know what you're supposed to be doing. Your brain doesn't have to work as hard. Well, when all of a sudden things change, not having that certainty can get people to kind of step back and be unsure. Same with COVID. How long is this going to last? Going to the government and the presidential, like Reese was government. I don't know if this is what you meant by government, but now all of a sudden we think we're going to have a Democratic president. What does that mean? How is that going to change all of us, right? So there's a lot of different things. Autonomy. This is when you feel micromanaged, when you feel like people are constantly scrutinizing your work and you don't have a sense of control over things. That's a trigger. Relatedness is being able to be with others, right? Being able to work together. You've worked for so long, you know how people react, you know who you can go to talk about the gossip, or who you can go to lend an ear. And all of a sudden when that gets removed, that's a trigger for people. And then finally, the fairness. This is so huge. This one happens a lot. There's a lot of people that were raised that have this fairness meter, right? How come that person has the same role that I have, but they're making more money than me? Or how come that person has my same role, but I'm doing all this work? Or how come they got that special project? Or how come and I'm doing, so that one's another trigger on there. So again, I bring this up as an opportunity for you. You can dive deeper into page 1 of your participant guide. Take a look at it even more. There's a lot of different things that you can do on that. And as we're putting our plans together, you can refer back to that to see some specific different things that you can do on the how to help people manage through change, or how to recognize what that change might look like. But the SCARF model is just very fascinating, and this helps me to think through and self-diagnose myself a lot. If I'm going through a change and I feel my emotions, I have to say, what am I feeling right now? Am I feeling triggered by status or certainty? And then I can help myself get through some of those different things on there. Before we move on, what questions or thoughts? I know we covered this one pretty quickly. Questions, thoughts, anything that you want to say about the SCARF model before we move on to talk about ourselves? Okay, so stabilizing yourself. As you're leading, it's important to understand the SCARF model, like I said, and to be able to, I guess what I'll call it, self-diagnose. And you probably heard on put your own air mask on first, because it's essential, because people can feel emotions, they can hear it. We've got so many different things that's happening in our body language or tone of voice or different things that we're doing. People are pretty smart and can pick up on those things. So it's important for us when change happens, when disruption happens, it's important for us to feel pretty okay with it before we even think about supporting and helping others. So we call this stabilizing yourself. It's important for you to understand and decide what you need to do first. And your role as a leader is to quickly diagnose the situation of what's going on and be able to move forward. So in this step, as you think about as a change comes on, and this can be a crisis or disruption change like we're talking about, or it can be a plan change. Even if you're planning it, you may have some mixed emotions about it. If you jump into helping your team members too quickly, you run the risk of becoming overwhelmed or engaging in inappropriate behaviors because you haven't checked in with yourself to see how you're doing. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about two quick things as it relates to stabilizing yourself. We're going to talk about some different emotions you might have, and then we'll talk about what you can do with it. So, as I said earlier, it's important for you to understand as a leader and kind of put your own ear mask on first and get your head on straight, because really you're going to be able to manage the team better. And they really are looking for confidence in the midst of change from their leaders. So we are on page 2. There's a lot of additional information on there. But I'm interested in, does anybody recognize what this model is?
The stages of grief?
Yeah. So it is the stages of grief. And what they have found, and I am kicking myself because I don't have the author on here, so I will find that out and give it back to you. But they've done a lot of research to find that people tend to go through with change and grief some of the same journey as they're going through. So the way that they describe it is change is almost, I wouldn't necessarily call it a death, and I don't want you to hear me saying change and death is the same, but it's saying goodbye to the old. And so people do tend to go through stages of grief. Okay. And so what's really interesting with this as you're working through the crisis and you're walking through this, you may be going through some of these different things. So you can see on their denial, this is thinking about COVID. If I figured most people could relate to that. This isn't going to impact us. People are making too big of a deal out of it. Things aren't going to get closed. This is going to be done by May, all of those things. And then people move into anger when things are still going on. This is my husband because sports got canceled and life was over for him, right? So now we're angry because now it's really impacting. Thank you so much, Kathy, for putting that in there. So now we're on to anger because now it's really impacting our life. Then we go through this bargaining, right? So this is only going to last for 2 weeks. I can be okay. We'll get through 2 weeks. We can move this on. Then there are periods of sadness. Like, when is this going to end? Everything's been changed, it's taken away, and then we move on to acceptance. And that's really when we think through, this is happening, how am I going to perceive? And acceptance, as you imagine, is where the power lies, right? As we're thinking about change, we want to find control and acceptance. Things that you can do, COVID, I can wash my hands, I can keep a safe distance, I can learn how to work virtually. I don't love or like this, but I can accept it and I can work through it and I can move on. And, we go through these different paces for each of us, and you cannot push or pull yourself or another person through these. But by being mindful, it helps you know more about what to anticipate through the process, and will also help you to coach your employees as they're going through those specific stages. So again, this is another diagnostic tool, another thing to think about when you're having people go through these. And people might move up and down through these. It's not a straight line of you're going to go through these quickly. People might go back and might think about some different things, right? So we cannot, unfortunately, predict when people are going to be able to do things. But the goal is to get people to acceptance, right? The goal is to help them manage their emotions, help them go through this change curve so that we eventually can get to acceptance. And acceptance is what we're going to be able to do when we really think about how we change. All right, so we're going to talk about one quick exercise that you can do to help yourself and help others move through these. We call this stabilize yourself, and essentially it's 4 questions. So what we ended up finding is when you ask yourself questions, you end up disrupting that emotional part of your brain. It's a brain hack that people are able to do when you feel like things are getting out of control. So the first thing is to pause and breathe. Check in with your emotions. You'll know because, a lot of times I physically, my heart will hurt when I'm feeling stressed out about change. So, you need to check in and say, what am I feeling? Go through that SCARF model. What am I feeling right now that's triggering me? Or the Kubler-Ross change curve, right? Where am I on this? So once you can name it, you can claim it. So then recognize, again, you can't take care of others until you can take care of yourself, right? So we're going to try to calm your mind, catch them when they're running away, and then asking, what got me here? Okay, why am I here? And there's some questions in that red box on there. What emotions am I feeling? How do I want to show up for my team? Am I reacting or responding? And then, of course, it's important for you to acknowledge that emotions drive behavior, even if it's hard to see. So for you and your team, there's a lot of different things you can do. The specific questions that are in the bottom are really good ones to help you, again, disrupt that emotional thing that's helping your brain so you can be the best leader for your team members. Okay, so we talked a lot about emotions. Again, a lot of these happen quickly when disruption or change happens to us, right? We didn't choose, and we talked about some of our emotions in our group work to begin with. We're going to move on into the planning portion, so how to plan and execute change. We're going to learn some neat models on this. Before we start talking about planning for change, I do want you to recognize that people are going to continue to go through these emotions, even if you plan for change, and you may go through those emotions because you cannot predict everything. So it's just constantly important for you to kind of check in with yourself and feel like see how you're feeling with that. So any questions you have about either the change curve or the SCARF model or anything we talked about on the questions? Okay. Feel free, if you're still chatting in, to do that. Kathy can interrupt me, or you are all welcome to interrupt me as well. So we're going to talk about change. We like to use the metaphor of going across the bridge. So I'm going to have Kathy walk through this slide, and we'll see if we can predict each other's behaviors, because there's a lot of animations.
Right?
Okay, so we have this beautiful building on your left-hand side. This is our old building. We're super excited about this building. It is known. Everyone knows. You sit by the same people. You have lunch together. You know your job in and out. This is comfortable for us, okay? Then we have the new building. Look at how beautiful the new building is. It's bright and it's pretty. And you as a leader know, because you've been part of the planning process for months, how awesome this new building is, right? And in this new building, there are changes. The whole new building is a change, right? But your job as a leader, see where she goes, is to get your people. There you go. There's me as a leader. I'm in the new building. I'm excited about it. I'm already over there. I'm ready to make the change. Hey, team, come on, let's go to the new building. It's going to be super excited. I really like it. Our job as leaders is to get our team members to get across that change bridge. Okay. And there's a really great process that we're going to talk about called ADKAR, about how we move people through change. So when you're trying to move people from the old building, remember, they're comfortable with. There's going to be a lot of triggers that are happening when you tell them to move. Just saying the word change makes people to kind of step back, right? Because it's different. They don't understand. So people are going to go across this change bridge at different instances, right? You may have somebody run across with you because they trust you and yup, I'm excited about it. I see it. I see the future. This is good. You have some people that kind of sit and they're like, I'm not really sure about this whole change process. You may have some people that start to go across the bridge and then come back. And then we have people that might fall off the change bridge because they've given up. I'm done dealing with change. We've had so much change, constant change. It's disruption. I just don't get it. So it's important for you as a leader to understand all of the different components, because when you first take those change steps and you understand what you're going through, you can help support your others, or support your other team members specifically on it. We can't ignore these people. You cannot force people across this change bridge. We cannot say change or you're going to do it, or you're not going to have a job or anything along those lines. It's important for people to recognize what's so good about this new process, and then for you as a leader to help them move on. Okay, so I have a statement on there that says organizations do not change until people do. I'm interested, what are your thoughts on that? Organizations do not change until people do. What does that mean by that? You can chat in, or go ahead, Viviana.
Yeah, I just think that the organization is the people, basically.
Yep. Absolutely. Anybody else? Yeah, she pretty much hit it on the head, right? Excuse me. Change management is a mindset, because organizations do not change. You cannot change an organization. And like Viviana said, people are the organization. And in terms of change, especially large scale change, there really can be a disconnect between companies focus on designing this brand new process or designing this new factory or this new building over there. And that's what people tend to focus on. Let's just get that software update out. We just got to go through, we got to do all these different things, make sure people's logins are ready. And we don't spend a lot of time on how do we get people to adopt the solution. And that is the biggest piece to think about, because as we're constantly changing, if we're paying attention to how people might react to it and we're putting plans in place, the change is going to go a lot more smoothly than if we were to just change it and say, all right, everyone, here are some job aids on how to use it and go. So it's important because, again, emotions control how people behave. Okay, so I want you to think about, don't do the slide yet, Kathy, so it gives them answers, but let's spend, no, I'm sorry. Nope, go to that slide. Behind the scene.
Okay. Oh,
No! Very good.
sorry.
Stop. Pause. Thanks. Okay, so what I'd like us to do now is think about, in chat, I'd like us to chat in, what are some consequences of not leading the people through change? So if you've just designed the expense system or construction management system, and you say, all right, here you go. It's the new system is designed and it's on there, or we've got staff changes or remote, or we're not helping people through it. We're just saying, go do it. What's going to happen? Perfect. Yeah. What are some different things to yeah, no buy-in, sabotage. Absolutely. People drag their feet. Yep, it will not be effective or efficient. What are some other things on here? Anybody else think of anything? What are some different, yep, changes take longer, decline, perfect. Yeah, that's what I was looking for. Yes, you got it, perfect. All right, Kathy, you can press play on the next one.
Okay, there we go.
All right, perfect. Yeah, absolutely. Change is not going to be effective, but I think the important thing to think about too is you're definitely going to have this distrust in this organization. People's emotions are going to take over. People will not embrace it. Some of my favorite things, I forgot who put, I have to scroll up, who put sabotage on there. Viviana. Yeah, so that's a big one. People try to sabotage your efforts, especially those people that have maybe a following of people that they're trusting to be able to do some different things. People find workarounds. And, oh, this is what you want to do, and this is how you want me to do it. Oh, but I've got this other thing I can do, and I can do it this way. You may have active resistance. You may have passive resistance. You may have people like, oh, yeah, absolutely, and then they don't do it. And the more we do this, the more we're not talking to people about the why behind the change and the importance of it, the more that it's going to hurt your organization's culture, as well as hurting the change efforts. A lot of change efforts, you'll see the second to the bottom one on there, the change ends up being scrapped because they'll say, oh, well, the new technology is not working. That new process isn't working, so let's just stop it. When in reality, it could absolutely be working, but unfortunately, we didn't help people manage the change, and so it really didn't get a good try for it on there. Okay, so now that we know how important it is about helping to lead people through change and what can happen, let's talk about how we can get better. We have something that we call ADKAR. It's by ProSci. This is on page 3 in your participant guide. You can just Google ProSci, ADKAR. They've got a lot of different tools that you can download on there. They have ebooks for each one of the letters to learn about even more. But we're going to talk a little bit high level about what ADKAR is and some unique things. And then we are going to use this to help us plan through those changes that we talked about in the beginning of this. So let's talk about A. A is the awareness of the need for change. This is helping people understand why we're changing. This is the communication piece. What's the nature of the change? Why is the change happening? What's the risk of not changing? What are some of the benefits for the change? This is an important piece because a lot of times people aren't aware about it until it's the, hey, we changed this. Not we are changing, it's we changed this, and here's your new login, right? And so people go through these like, what? I don't know how I'm doing these different things. The second piece is desire. So desire is the psychological and emotional piece. We call it the WIFM. I don't know how people have heard of WIFM. What's in it for me? People need to know this, right? Organizations don't change, people change. And I even want to break it down to say individuals change. So it's one change at a time with individuals. So this is the opportunity that people decide to engage in and support the change. Then we have K for knowledge on how to change. So this is helping people have the know-how to make the change, even if they're motivated to go on it. And then this is helping them understand the skills and behaviors to change. We got another A on there, and that's ability. So this is, do you have the materials, the equipment? Is your culture ready to be able to change? Are there barriers that are going to prevent you from being able to do it? And then finally, reinforcement. And reinforcement is a sustainment piece. You know, we talked a lot about how some people just scrap the change. And a lot of it comes from the reinforcement is, oh, everyone changed, and then we haven't talked about it in forever. So now people are going back to their workarounds. So this is a sustainment piece. Do we have what we need for the change to stick? This can be recognition. This could even be talking about it, sharing a lot of different success stories, reminding people. It's often the piece that gets left out and why the change doesn't specifically stick. And it's really important as you're planning the change process to continue to reinforce it. So before we move on, I'm interested in, if you think about overall change that's happening in your life, either currently or past changes, what do you think that is the letter or the piece, we'll go ahead and chat this in, that is typically the one that's left off or skipped over? If we think about all of these, which one is the one that's left off or skipped over? You can just put the letter in there into chat, okay? Reinforcement. Yep. Got a lot of R's coming in. Yeah, so that, somebody got it. Yeah, Andrea, good job. So I think I threw you for a loop when I said reinforcement is the one that tends to get left off to sustain the change. And it's actually reinforcement, but as well as desire. because we've talked about we can't force people to change. Desire is the why, the what's in it for me, the why do I want to change? Why is this important? Once we get people to be able to get to that point, and that's honestly the hardest point to get to people. And that's why I gave you the SCARF model, and I gave you the change curve, and I gave you all of those desires. Because once you can help people move to that acceptance point, that's when you can really start changing and doing the knowledge and the ability and the reinforcement. So what's really neat about this ADKAR model, I'll say one more thing about the reinforcement. As we're talking about the reinforcement pieces, reinforcing that desire, what you use for that desire is going to be crucial. And again, a lot of additional resources are available in your participant guide that I put on there for you, as well as you can go to the ProSci website. What's really neat about ADKAR is this is a planning process for change. So you can plan out to make sure you've got all the specific steps necessary for change. The other really neat thing is it's a diagnostic tool, and we'll talk a little bit about what that means. So you're able to understand why your change isn't working the way you planned, and you'll be able to find out what are some different levers that you need to pull to be able to move the change as you're communicating it. And then the final thing is it works with individuals as well. So based on how people are asking questions or things that they're stuck on, you'll be able to understand how you need to support people. All right, Kathy, let's go ahead and move over to the 4 Ps. So we are now on still on page 3. What we're going to be doing right now is we're going to be breaking into groups. So we've got everybody into the groups we talked about: community needs, staff changes, AmeriCorps, remote, and COVID. Everyone's going to be broken into groups. Kathy's arranging it. If you don't get in a group that you wanted, you can blame her. I'm sure she's doing a wonderful job on it. But essentially what we're going to be doing is we are going to be walking through a planning process specifically for how to plan ADKAR and how to put something in place. This first one that we're going to do is called the 4 Ps exercise. So we'd like you, when you get into your groups, you can call your project name. You don't have to come up with something fancy unless you want like Project North Star or something along those lines. It can be Project COVID, but name it something that everyone's going to understand. Then here is where we can think about some getting back to that desire piece. Why are we changing? Okay, so think through, and we're just doing this really quickly. What are a couple things about why we're changing? Then we have to think through what is changing. Okay, so what is changing? If we're thinking about COVID, then people are working from home, people are wearing masks, people are doing these different processes. So just think through a couple of different things. And then we've got people. So who is changing? And typically for this one, you list it's like leaders or different locations or anything along those lines. So just think through a couple of different people. We would like you to have somebody keep track of this, either if you want to write it down or something along those lines, because we're going to be going through some specific steps to get a plan in place for you. So you'll want to keep track of that. So Kathy,
so I have one question. I need to know who is calling in from 614531, because I want to make sure your audio gets connected with your video.
It's Tommy.
It is Tommy. Okay.
It is Tommy, please.
Okay, you got it.
Okay, so we'll give you let's give them about 3 minutes. Very quickly, talking through all these changes seem to be something that you're all familiar with. So when you're ready, Kathy, we'll give them 3 minutes, then we'll bring you back and we'll move on to step 2.
Yes, and just so you'll know that you'll be working on the subject that is on your team name. If you've got any